My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 34 years old. And until 6 weeks ago, I honestly thought I was the daughter every family dreams of having. I'm the only child from my father's first marriage. I put myself through Stanford Law on scholarship. Made partner at my firm in Seattle by 31. And quietly paid off my father's second mortgage, the year he turned 65. When my half-sister got engaged to a software executive from Bellevue, I didn't hesitate. I wrote a check for $92,000 and slid it across the dining room table. Whatever she wants. I told my stepmother, the lakefront estate, the designer gown, the live orchestra, the imported flowers. Give her the wedding of her dreams. I thought I was buying a memory for my family. I didn't realize I was financing the day they planned to disappear me for good. The moment everything came apart. I was reviewing a merger agreement in my corner office on the 42nd floor. Rain was hitting the window in long gray sheets. The way it always does in Seattle in April. When my assistant buzzed to say a woman named Colette was on line 2. Said it was urgent. Said it was about the Morgan wedding. I picked up, still holding my pen. Hey Colette. I said. Need the final floral count already. There was a breath on the line that made the pen slip out of my fingers. Rachel, she said. And her voice was so careful, it sounded like she was handling glass. I am so sorry to be the one doing this. Your stepmother came in this morning, with your father and your sister. They asked me to take you off the guest list. I laughed out loud. It was an involuntary thing. The kind of laugh that comes out when your brain refuses to accept a sentence. Take me off, I said. I paid for the entire event. Colette went very quiet. They told me the $92,000 was a gift. She said. They said you'd been too swamped with a trial to really commit. And that having you there would make your sister feel overshadowed on her own day. They asked me to quietly remove your seat at the head table and let them handle any awkwardness with family friends later. Something behind my ribs turned to ice water. Let me make sure I have this straight. Colette, I said. My stepmother. My father. And my sister walked into your studio this morning. Kept my $92,000. Erased me from the ceremony I paid for. And you said, okay. Another pause. Long enough that I could hear someone laughing in her office hallway. Completely unaware of what was happening on the other end of her phone. I didn't know what else to do. She whispered. They're the ones I deal with every day. At least on paper. They're the clients. I swiveled my chair slowly toward the window. Out past the rain. I could see the tops of the buildings that held half my firm's biggest clients. Every one of them, a reminder of exactly who I had become, while my family was apparently deciding I was too inconvenient to invite. Colette, I said. And I heard my own voice go soft and surgical, in a way it only does in depositions. You and I both know who owns the venue you booked. She hesitated. Technically, she said. The Whitlock estate is under your family trust. But your stepmother said you'd verbally authorized all of it. She keeps telling me you don't care about the details. I didn't speak for a second. Then I leaned forward and said it as clearly as I could. Pull every single vendor. The florist. The caterer. The orchestra. The transportation. The lighting. The linens. Everyone that traces back to me. Cancel it all. Her breath caught. Rachel, she said. If I do that, the whole wedding collapses. You do understand that you personally hold the contracts on all of these. Right? Oh. I know. I said. Now, maybe my stepmother will understand it too. Before I tell you what I found when I couldn't sleep that night, and what I discovered had been happening behind my back for 3 entire years. I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now and tell me what time it is, where you're watching from, and what city you're in. I want to see just how many people are about to watch a family like mine get everything they earned. And not one penny more. I didn't sleep. I kept replaying Colette's voice in my head. The careful way she'd said the words. The pity underneath them. At a little after 2 in the morning, I gave up and took my laptop down to the kitchen island. Poured myself a whiskey I didn't really want. And started doing what I do for a living. I pulled records. People don't often realize this about attorneys. But the good ones are part historian, part accountant, part bloodhound. I'd opened a private folder for the wedding the day I wired the money. Because old habits die hard. I had every vendor contract, every email confirmation, every bank receipt stored in chronological order. I opened the folder now. Not to double-check the numbers, but because I suddenly wanted to know exactly how long this had been going on. That's when I saw the thread my stepmother had forgotten I was copied on. An email she had sent to Colette 11 days earlier. From her personal account, that had been auto-forwarded into my folder by a rule I'd set up months ago for anything with the word Morgan in the subject line. Subject: Rachel's role at the ceremony. Colette. It read, "Please make sure Rachel is not listed in any of the wedding program materials. She's a difficult personality and tends to pull attention. My husband agrees it's best to frame her as a supportive family member behind the scenes. The money is a gift from her. She understands. Please do not mention finances to her again. She becomes very controlling when money enters the conversation." I read that line 3 times. Controlling. Difficult personality. I read it a 4th time. I scrolled to the next email. This one was from my father. Sent the same afternoon from his work account. Colette. He wrote, just reiterating what Linda said. Rachel is incredibly busy right now with her firm. Let's treat this as though we're covering the costs ourselves. When guests ask, we'll simply say the Morgan family is delighted to host. She'll be fine with it. She always is. She'll be fine with it. She always is. I set the whiskey down because my hand was shaking, and I did not want to be the kind of woman who shakes over an email her own father sent. I kept scrolling. I found screenshots Colette had apparently saved from a family group chat I had never been added to. It was called Brittany's Big Day. And it had my stepmother, my father, my half-sister Brittany, her fiancé, and 2 cousins in it. I hadn't been invited. I'd paid for it. But I hadn't been invited to the conversation about it. Brittany had written, "Honestly, I love Rachel, but she suffocates every room she's in. She's going to walk in with that whole partner at a firm aura, and the photos will be about her. Can we just not?" For once, my stepmother had replied, "She'll understand. She always does. She's wired to be the reliable one. It's actually a comfort." My father had sent a thumbs-up emoji. A thumbs up. My cousin had written, "So she pays for it and doesn't come. Genius. Linda. You are a genius." My stepmother had replied with a kiss emoji and said, "I've been managing her since she was 12. I know what I'm doing. I've been managing her since she was 12. Tell me honestly. If you opened a phone and found your own family, joking about how smoothly they'd trained you to be quiet, what would you do? Would you take a breath and keep the peace? Or would you walk into their kitchen the next morning and show them exactly what they had been managing?" Because I sat there at my kitchen island at 4 in the morning, and I realized something I had been refusing to see for 20 years. Every time I'd covered my half-sister's tuition, Linda had told me not to mention it, because Brittany was sensitive about the age gap in our accomplishments. Every time I'd paid down my father's debt, he'd reminded me not to bring it up at Thanksgiving because he didn't want his brothers thinking he needed help. every time I'd bought my stepmother a car, a trip, a surgery. She'd thanked me in private and then in public had referred to herself as self-made. For 2 decades, I had quietly written checks and silently taken credit for nothing. And my entire family had rewarded me by building a private group chat, where my absence was the punchline. But I am my mother's daughter. And my mother, before she died, used to say one thing when people tried to walk over her at the hospital where she practiced medicine. She would say, "The moment you see the pattern, you're no longer a victim of it. You're a witness. And witnesses testify." I picked up my phone and called Colette back at 4:15 in the morning. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. I told her exactly what I wanted, in the order I wanted it, and I watched the sky turn pink over Lake Washington while I did it. The next afternoon I flew down to Portland and drove the rental car out to the Whitlock estate, which sat on 16 acres of vineyard my family held in trust and which my half-sister had decided was the only place in the Pacific Northwest worthy of her ceremony. My father and stepmother had moved into the caretaker's cottage on the property 3 years ago, right after I'd quietly settled the back taxes that had nearly cost them the land. They still told their friends they'd earned the right to retire there. The driveway was already full when I pulled up. My uncle's truck, 2 of Linda's sisters in their matching white SUVs, my father's golfing friend's sedan. They'd been warned I was coming. Circle the wagons. Hide the evidence. Get the story straight before the lawyer daughter walks in. I walked up the gravel path in the flats I'd worn on the plane, carrying nothing but my handbag and a manila folder. And I pushed the front door open without knocking. The living room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when someone walks in who wasn't supposed to. My stepmother Linda was on the good sofa, a glass of white wine in her hand at 3 in the afternoon. My father was in his armchair, already standing as though that would protect him. Brittany was in the bay window seat, her fiancé next to her, her hand on his knee, like a woman who expected to be defended. 2 aunts hovered by the kitchen door, pretending to arrange a cheese board nobody had asked for. "There she is," my father said, using his courtroom-friendly voice, the one he'd learned from me without ever thanking me for it. "Rachel. Honey. We were just talking about you." "I bet you were," I said. I closed the door behind me. I want this on the record before anyone opens their mouth. I know about the emails to Colette. I know about the group chat called Brittany's Big Day. I know Linda and Dad went into the wedding planner's office yesterday morning and asked to have me removed from the guest list while keeping my $92,000. Linda's face went the color of old paper. "Who showed you those emails?" she whispered. I smiled. "You did," I said. "I set up the forwarding rule myself on the day I wired the money. I'm an attorney." "Linda, you raised me with a man who taught me to read every contract twice. Did you really think I wouldn't paper my own family?" Brittany stood up. "You've been spying on us," she said. "It's my wedding." "Rachel," I said. "I paid for your wedding." "Brittany, there is a legal difference." I let the silence sit. My father opened his mouth the way he does when he's about to try to reframe something, and I turned my full attention on him. "Dad," I said, "do you know how much this wedding actually costs?" He blinked. He started. I cut him off. $178,000. I said, "You're paying less than 52% of that because every single vendor on that contract is either owned by my firm's holdings, runs through my personal network, or operates on the Whitlock estate, which is held in a trust that names me, not you, as primary beneficiary. You are not the clients on this wedding. On paper, In every single document. I am. Linda made a small choking sound. That's not. She said. That land is ours. We live on it. You live on it. I said gently. Because I pay the property taxes every April. The land is mine. It has been mine since Grandpa Whitlock died and left it to me in his will. Which you, Linda, have conveniently been telling your sisters you inherited for almost a decade. The ants by the cheese board went very still. Brittany's fiancé, whose name I had only learned 2 months ago, looked at her with something new in his face. Something that looked like a first question. Brittany, he said quietly. Is that true? She didn't answer him. She was staring at me with a look I'd never seen on her before. Somewhere between panic and calculation. And I realized in that moment that my half-sister was not 19 anymore. She was 27, and she had known exactly what she was doing. Let me tell you what happens next, I said. Because I want to be fair. I am not going to scream. I am not going to cry. I am not going to beg any of you to love me. I am going to tell you what I've already done. And then I am going to leave. And you are going to have the rest of the afternoon to decide what kind of family you want to be from tomorrow onward. At 7 this morning, I called Colette back. Every vendor she booked for this wedding that traces to me. My firm. My holdings. Or the Whitlock Trust has been released from your contract. That's the venue. The catering. The floral design. The string quartet. The lighting. The transportation. The welcome bag fulfillment. The photographer. And the officiant she recommended, who happens to be a former colleague of mine from Stanford. Linda actually stood up. You can't. She started. I can. I said. I already did. I have the emails. Every vendor agreed to release, because the contract clauses I personally negotiated 3 years ago allow the principal financier to withdraw with 72 hours notice. Colette has been paid her fee in full from my personal account. She is no longer your planner. My father sat down heavily. Rachel, he said, his voice cracking in a way I had not heard since the day we buried my mother. Please. Brittany deserves a wedding. I looked at him. She deserves a wedding she can afford. Dead. I said. That's a different sentence than the one you just spoke. Brittany burst into tears. Real ones. Or a performance of real ones. I wasn't sure, and I found that I didn't care. You're ruining my life, she said. You're doing this because you're jealous. I almost laughed. Jealous of what? Brit. I said. Your fiancé, I have one. Your career, I have one. Your wedding, I paid for 2 of yours already. You just don't remember the practice, one we all forgot about when Kyle called it off. But I do. Because I wrote that check too. Her fiancé, whose name I remembered now was Marcus, stood up slowly. He looked at Brittany. Then at Linda. Then at me. He said, I think I need to go for a drive. He walked out. He didn't slam the door. He just walked out. And the silence he left behind was the loudest thing in that room for a full 30 seconds. Linda rounded on me. You have destroyed this family, she hissed. Do you know how we'll look at church? At the club? At the Rotary dinner? Do you know how I'll explain this to your father's cousins? I smiled. You've been explaining me to them for 20 years. Linda, I said. I'm sure you'll think of something creative. But here is what you will not be explaining. Because I have already done it for you. On my drive here from the airport, I called Aunt Denise, Aunt Patricia, Uncle Gerald, and Grandma Ruth. I told them, In plain language. What had happened? I told them about the emails. I told them about the group chat. I told them about the 92,000. And I told them that going forward, every financial arrangement I have ever made on this family's behalf, from Dad's second mortgage to the Whitlock tax bill to Brittany's undergraduate tuition at Willamette, will be put on formal paper and treated as a loan with interest, to be repaid on a schedule, starting next month, or called in full. My father made a sound that was not quite a word. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said. And I meant it. But I also didn't let my face soften. I grew up watching my mother eat her own resentment until the cancer ate her back. I'm not doing that. Not for you. Not for Linda. Not for Brittany. Let me ask you. If you were standing in my shoes in that living room, with an entire family that had just been caught, would you have stayed for dinner to keep the peace? Or would you have put the folder on the coffee table and walked out? Because I walked out. I didn't slam the door either. I just left. My rental car ride back to the Portland airport was not silent. My phone started at minute 1 and did not stop for 3 hours. Missed calls from Linda. Voicemails from 2 aunts, who had apparently called Linda first before calling me. A text from Brittany that just said, "You selfish bitch." And then, 40 minutes later, another text from her that just said, "Please." And then nothing. My father sent one message. It said, "We need to talk." I did not answer it. Not yet. Back in my hotel room, I did what I do best. I opened my laptop. I made a list. And I worked the problem. First, the Whitlock estate. I called the property manager directly. A man named Henrik, who had worked for my grandfather since before I was born. "Henrik," I said, "I'm invoking my rights under the trust. The Morgan wedding on May 18th is cancelled. Any deposit retained by the estate is to be redirected to the Employee Emergency Fund. If my father or stepmother call, they are to be informed that the estate is a private holding and that booking inquiries must go through my office." Henrik was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Miss Rachel, your grandfather told me before he passed that one day you'd have to take this land back. I'm glad I got to see it." I nearly cried. I didn't. But I nearly did. Next, the catering company, which my firm had a silent 51% stake in. I called the owner. A friend named Priya, who had been waiting for years for one of us to push each other out of our comfort zones. "Priya," I said, "the Morgan wedding is dead. Reassign every single staff member to the benefit event we're catering on the same night for the Children's Hospital in Portland. Any food that's already been prepped or ordered is donated. I do not want a penny of refund. Mark the loss down against my personal distribution." She laughed. A small, delighted laugh. "Rachel," she said. "What did they do?" I said. "They treated me like furniture." She said. "Consider it handled." Next, the string quartet, which was not mine, but which Colette had booked on my reputation. I called the lead violinist, a woman named Ingrid, who had played at my mother's funeral and had known me since I was a teenager. "Ingrid," I said, "the Morgan wedding on the 18th. You're released. Book something else." She said. "Oh, honey. What happened?" I told her. She said, "I wouldn't have played that wedding anyway once I knew. Take care of yourself." She hung up. By the time I'd finished my list, the sun had gone down over the Willamette River, and my phone had gone from constant ringing to an eerie quiet. I ordered room service. I ate a cheeseburger and drank a glass of red wine, and I stared at the ceiling and let myself feel For the first time in 3 days. The grief of it. Because under the anger, there was grief. My father had chosen Linda over me at every turn. And my half-sister, who I had practically helped raise when Linda was too busy with her tennis league, had decided somewhere along the line that my existence was a tax on her happiness. My best friend Dana called around 10. She's an ER doctor in Chicago, and she can smell a crisis through 3 time zones. "Tell me everything," she said. I did. When I got to the part about the group chat, she exhaled the kind of breath that only ER doctors know how to exhale. "Rachel," she said, "I have watched you pay for that family for 15 years. I have watched you miss my wedding because Brittany had a breakdown about her thesis. I have watched you fly home from 3 vacations because Linda needed a ride from a surgery she could have taken an Uber from. If you had not blown that wedding up today, I would have flown to Seattle and blown it up for you." I laughed. And the laugh turned into a sob. And Dana stayed on the line for 40 minutes while I cried, and did not apologize for crying. Then she said the thing I needed to hear. She said, "You didn't ruin their wedding. You stopped funding the one where you didn't exist. There's a difference. If you're still with me, I want to know something honestly. Was I wrong to use the leverage I had? Or is the only language people like my stepmother ever really learn the one where the money stops showing up? Drop your answer. Because I need to know I'm not the only one who thinks love with no accountability eventually becomes theft." 2 days after I walked out of the Whitlock estate, my phone buzzed with a notification I wasn't expecting. Someone had added me to a group chat that was not my stepmother's. This one had just 3 people in it. May, Brittany, and Marcus, her fiancé. Marcus had started it. "Rachel," he wrote, "I want to hear your side. All of it. Brittany is not allowed to speak until you finish." I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I typed, I told him about the 92,000. I told him about the 20 years before that. I told him about my mother dying when I was 14, and Linda moving in before my mother's rose garden had finished its last bloom. I told him about tuition, second mortgages, the Whitlock tax bill, Brittany's first car, Brittany's second car, Brittany's lawyer. When she got the DUI, nobody in the family ever admitted out loud. I told him about the group chat. I sent screenshots. He did not respond for almost an hour. Then he wrote, "Brittany, I need you to look me in the face tomorrow and tell me whether a single thing Rachel just said is untrue." Brittany did not respond in the chat at all. But the next morning, she texted me privately. It said, "I didn't know about the taxes. I didn't know you paid Grandpa's medical stuff. Mom always said it was insurance. Rachel, I am so sorry." I read that text, sitting in my office in Seattle, in the gray light through the rain, and I did not know what to do with it. I believed her. That was the strange part. I believed that Brittany, at 27, I was just now finding out what her mother had been doing with my name for her entire adult life. I also knew that believing her did not change what she herself had written in that group chat. The sentence, "She suffocates every room she's in." That had been Brittany's. Linda hadn't put that in her mouth. I wrote back, "Brit, I appreciate that. I really do. And I'm not going to pretend the last 20 years didn't happen because you suddenly found out the truth about your mother this week. If you want to have a real relationship with me going forward, it starts with you understanding what you yourself wrote about me. Not what Linda did. What you did." She wrote back, "I understand. I'll do the work." 4 days later, something else happened I hadn't planned for. I got a call from my grandmother Ruth, my father's mother, who is 87 years old and lives in assisted living in Eugene, and almost never calls anyone because she hates the phone. Rachel, she said. I braced. I thought I was about to be lectured by the matriarch of the family about the importance of forgiveness. Instead, she said, I should have told you this 30 years ago. I watched Linda move into your mother's house before the dirt was settled. I watched your father let her redecorate your mother's bedroom. I have been watching her spend your money and take credit for your character for my entire widowhood. And I have said nothing. Because I am an old woman and I am a coward. I am calling to say I am proud of you. And I am calling to tell you that your grandfather, Whitlock, my husband, I did not leave that land to the family. He left it to you. He told me the week before he died, I want Rachel to have somewhere that is hers. He said, Rachel will take care of the rest of them. But Rachel deserves to know that one place on earth is hers. I have said nothing for 12 years. I am saying something now. I sat in my office, and I cried for the second time that week. My grandmother said, I want you to come see me. Bring whiskey. We have things to talk about. I said I would. I flew to Eugene on a Saturday. I brought the whiskey. She told me things about my father I had not known. Things about my mother I had forgotten. Things about Linda I had suspected, but never confirmed. She told me that when my mother was dying, Linda had come to the hospital twice. Both times with my father. Both times with a real estate agent. She told me my father had signed the listing paperwork for my mother's house, while my mother was still alive in the next room. I did not cry again. I think I had run out of tears for that particular grief. My grandmother held my hand and said, Rachel, you will not be the first woman in this family to be emptied out by the people who called themselves your family. But if I have any say in it, you will be the last. I kissed her on the forehead and told her I would do my best. 3 weeks after I canceled the wedding, I sat down with my firm's estate attorney, and we restructured every financial entanglement I had with my family. The Whitlock estate was moved into a private trust with me as sole beneficiary and my grandmother as protector. Linda and my father were informed in writing that they were welcome to remain in the caretaker's cottage under a formal lease at market rate. Or they were welcome to vacate within 90 days. Every loan I had ever made that had been quietly written off was formalized, documented, and sent to Linda, Brittany, and my father with a repayment schedule. My father called me the day he received the paperwork. He said, Rachel, this is cruel. I said, Dad, this is bookkeeping. Cruelty is what Linda did to the story of our family. This is just the ledger catching up. He was quiet for a long time. Then, he said, Your mother would be ashamed of me. I said, Dad, that's not mine to carry. You'll have to take that one up with her yourself. 6 months later, Brittany and Marcus got married in a backyard ceremony at his parents' house in Bellevue. 41 guests. A potluck reception. A used wedding dress from a consignment shop in Ballard. I was there. I brought a gift. A set of good knives and a card that said, I love you. Build something real. I did not pay for the wedding. Marcus's parents paid for the catering and the tent. Brittany paid for her own dress. My father and Linda attended as regular guests. And for the first time in my adult life, I watched my stepmother sit quietly at a family event and not hold court. It was small. And it was honest. And I cried a little during the vows. And Marcus looked at me from across the yard and nodded once. The kind of nod that meant, I see you. Thank you. My father and I speak now. Maybe once a month. He has started, very slowly, to say things like, You worked hard for that. Instead of, You got lucky. Linda and I do not speak. She sent me a letter at Christmas that said she was sorry and that she hoped I would come home for the holidays. I did not write back. Some apologies are not an invitation. Some are just a document for the writer's own conscience. And I am too old to carry other women's documents for them. Here is what I want to leave you with. Because I think there's a woman out there watching this who has done the math on her own family and already knows the answer and is just waiting for permission to say it out loud. Love is not the same thing as access. A family that can only love you while you're paying for their life is not loving you. It is using you. And the kindest thing you can ever do for a family like that is to stop. Not to punish them. Not to teach them a lesson. Not to make a scene. Just to stop. Because the moment you stop, the truth of the arrangement becomes visible to everyone. Including you. My grandfather left me a piece of land because he knew, even then, that his son would marry a woman who would try to take it, and his granddaughter would be the only one with the spine to hold it. I did not know, for 34 years, that I was the one he had chosen. Now I do. And I intend to deserve it. So I want to ask you, honestly, before you click away from this video, what is one arrangement in your own life right now where you are paying, financially or emotionally, or both, for a version of your family where you don't actually exist? Sit with that question. Don't answer it fast. And if you've ever been the reliable one, the fixer, the fallback, the daughter who wrote the check and didn't expect a thank you, I want you to tell me your story in the comments. Because I think there are more of us than any of our families ever counted on. And I think the day we start counting each other is the day the whole system my stepmother was running finally runs out of road. I stopped paying for a family that didn't include me. I would do it again tomorrow. And if you're sitting on the edge of a decision like mine, I hope this was the sign you were waiting for.